Okay. All right. Welcome to the AV and ADAS webinar on LinkedIn. We're just waiting for Marc Amblard to join. He'll join us in a minute. We had some technical problems, so apologies to those of you that have been waiting. We have a chat, so please feel free to drop some comments in chats, where you're from, what you want to know, and we'll start chatting to Marc Amblard about our AV and ecosystem map as soon as he joins in a minute or so. Okay.
Hello, Ross.
Hey, Marc. Great. Okay. So apologies to everybody. We 15 minutes late. We had some problems connecting StreamYard to LinkedIn, but we're now live, and we're going to chat for half an hour with Marc Amblard from Orsay Consulting about the ADAS and AV ecosystem map, and a little bit about what's happening in the autonomous vehicle market. What are the trends Marc has seen? But let's start off with the AV and ecosystem map. So this is the second year we have published it with Marc. And last year we had about 500 downloads, and this year we had 1,500 downloads over a shorter period of time. So Marc, why do you think there's so much more interest in the AV ecosystem map? Do you think that the industry is growing, or do you think that suddenly the map has just found its voice? What's the reason for that?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm based in San Francisco, so I'm not sure where everyone is. Thanks, Ross, for having me. The ecosystem map that we published together in March is obviously an evolution, but the same versus the previous versions. Same time, we've seen some consolidation. So I guess big picture is there is continued consolidation in the industry. At the same time, there is an increased interest because both at the level 4 level, robotaxi, autonomous trucking level, and also at the ADAS level 2 and to some extent level 3 as well, there is also further deployment. I guess we'll come back to that with Ross, but so in level 4 is regaining some interest, both mainly in the US and China, and level 2 continues to be deployed across range for everyone's cars. There's also continued consolidation insofar as some of the players have disappeared between the last version and previous one, such as Cruise that have been closed down. But we'll come back to more details on that.
And roughly, how many companies were in the map last year, and how many companies are in the map this year?
I've added some. We've added some. I think we've added a net of about 25 or 30 companies, but big ones have disappeared. It's more, the increase is more related to the fact that I've seen new companies that did not know about before. But certainly we've seen, again, some big fish closing down. And in total, it's about 450 companies across the landscape.
Okay, great. And for those of you that have not downloaded it yet, you can go onto the autonomy.paris website, and you'll see under content the ecosystem map. And if you're on the website, have a look at our AV summit that's taking place in London on the 9th and 10th of July, which is sponsored by Imagery, our friends from Haifa in Israel. And please join us at that summit. I think it's now the leading summit on autonomous vehicles in Europe. And we are looking at connecting buyers and sellers, and we have quite some interesting buyers attending. So Marc, let's go back to and look at the trends. I read the Financial Times every morning, and suddenly there's a lot more writing about European defense and drones and military and autonomous vehicles. And you sort of get the sense that suddenly autonomous vehicle companies are starting to make some money. What is, the sort of big trends? I mean, you're a Frenchman living in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. I'm a South African living in Paris, and I've just got back from quite a long trip to China, where I visited a couple of autonomous vehicle companies, including WeRide. What are the big trends you're seeing between China, USA, and Europe?
I would say that there has been, I guess the most significant trend has been the acceleration of the deployment in the US under the leadership of Waymo. Now the company operates in 4 cities across the US, started in Phoenix in 2020. I'm talking about commercial operation without anyone behind the wheel. Phoenix in 2020, then San Francisco 2023, Los Angeles 24. Earlier this year, it was Austin in Texas, and it will be Atlanta later this year, and it'll be then Miami, Washington, D.C. in 2026. So this clear acceleration hitting now the latest number is 250,000 paid rides per week, which equates to roughly 250 million to 300 million annual gross revenue per year for Waymo. We have less visibility to what's happening in China, but last time I checked, there were, I think, 10 or 11 cities where we have similar operations, or more cities at the same time. There's some of the companies are stepping back. I understand that AutoX is stepping out of the Chinese robotaxi market. Baidu continues to deploy, so do WeRide and Pony. And in Europe, we're still at the pilot stage. Unfortunately, I regret that, pilot stage, and still discussion on regulation. Increased interest, certainly, and we've seen also on the part of US and Chinese players some inroads in the European market with European players, whether they be OEMs or possibly mobility companies as well. So that's, I guess, what's been happening. And also, so that's for the robotaxi space. And there's also some interesting news on the trucking space, autonomous trucking space, whereby the most recent announcement was Aurora Innovation in the US starting to operate, just having the first ride on the freeway without anyone behind the wheel. However, in China, Pony AI has been doing that for a couple of years now. Paid transportation of cargo, even though there need to be someone in the cabin, because that's a regulation, not necessarily behind the wheel, but someone in the cabin reading a book, whatever. But that's the way it is. Again, as far as Europe is concerned, this is still a space where there is little activity at this point, or no activity per se.
Let's talk about profitability and money. As everybody knows, Tesla's share price hasn't really dropped that much, despite a massive drop in car sales of the electric vehicles. And what Tesla bulls and supporters believe is that Elon Musk is about to deploy a whole lot of robo-taxis, and those are going to be extremely profitable because his business model is different, where instead of him owning the fleet, they'll be owned by individuals buying a robo-taxi for $15,000 to $25,000 and then deploying it when they're not using it. How likely is it that Tesla can deploy robo-taxis in America at scale?
Well, one thing, just take a step back. I've been Tesla fan, Tesla as the product, not as the company anymore. And I've been on my second Tesla, so I'm not ashamed to say that. Even though I despise what the CEO stands for, but that's something else. As far as the promises that Tesla has been making for several years, today we are in a similar situation. We're probably closer to the arrival line. However, we've heard this promise several times in the past 8 years. As far as the technology readiness is concerned, I've tried several times what's called full self-driving FSD here, obviously in public roads. Last time I checked, the tech was not ready. Clearly, it was still very far away from what Waymo stands in terms of drivability, comfort, smoothness of the ride, and so forth. And I don't see the technology as being ready. Also, the company does not have the right authorizations to operate. Certainly not in California. Texas may be easier. Today, I understand the company operates on maybe like a handful of vehicles with someone behind the wheel. That's the regulation at this point for them, and transporting employees. So we're still some distance away from having a network where those vehicles operate and generate revenue for vehicles owners. The vehicle itself also that was presented about 6 months ago now, what's so-called the cyber cab, has been delayed. Also being a coupe, a two-door coupe, I don't see that as being right form factor for this vehicle, because egress-ingress is certainly not ideal for this sort of use case. But that's my stand. I'm, again, very doubtful as far as Tesla's ability to deploy a network in the coming months.
Okay, let's talk about different use cases. Obviously, robo-taxis get a lot of the press, particularly since Waymo launched in America. But what we're seeing is a whole lot of other applications. So in Europe, the big interest is really coming from public transport authorities and public transport operators. At our event, we have a couple of buyers who are public transport authorities. And the reason they're looking for autonomous solutions is that bus drivers are so expensive. One of them comes from the city of Geneva, and the cost to company of a bus driver is 10,000 euros a month. So they cannot find bus drivers. I think the average age now is like 58 of their bus drivers. And nobody wants to be a bus driver in the age of YouTube. So in Europe, do you think we might start seeing rapid deployment of autonomous shuttles, autonomous buses, working through public transport operators in conjunction with the public transport authority? Because Europe's very much against single car use and very much for public transport. And how ready is that technology? We have, for example, a couple of companies that are, have shuttle and bus solutions attending our summit. How ready is that technology, and how fast could that be deployed?
Yeah, I mean, Europe was probably the first region to see autonomous movement of people with shuttles. Navia, Easymaya were the early starters back in 2015 in the US. We had LM Motors, but I think Navia and Easymaya made a bigger impact on the market.
There was Hollow in Denmark too. There were a couple, right. Local Motors, Hollow. There were a lot of in Europe.
Yeah, there's been a handful, maybe half a dozen companies around the world that had some sort of success, I would say. Deployments with pilots, 2, 3, 4, 5 shuttles at a time. However, this has proven to remain a niche, which is unfortunately why it kind of falls so a few years back. Nevertheless, there are definitely applications, whether it be in the form of shuttles or robotaxi. By the way, for those who have different difficulties seeing the difference, a new shuttle is programmed to go through waypoints, from a given point A to a given point B to C to D and back to A, following a programmed path from which it can deviate by a few meters and not more. Whereas a robotaxi can go from any point A to any point B within certain operating design domain. And that's a big difference. And nevertheless, I can still see some applications for shuttles, but more so for robotaxis in Europe by the side of a public transit, which I'm a big fan, because you can take people, for instance, in neighborhoods that have very little service of public transit, and then for people with low mobility, people who don't have a car, especially providing equity in access to transportation, thanks to this sort of solution, without having to set up a bus line, or even less so a tram line, because those are, tram line is expensive. The bus line is a set line that does not necessarily have a whole lot of riders. So there in Europe, there's definitely an opportunity to offer improved mobility services to lesser served areas or groups of people with the likes of robotaxis, and to a lesser extent shuttles. They still have to take shape. Regulation is still kind of behind, even is further ahead. At the same time, is hindering to some extent some of the deployment that we should be seeing at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Karsan, the bus manufacturer from Turkey, is one of the leaders with ADAS tech, and they are looking to get into that market. Let's also look at a bit of the logistics market. In Europe, there's 6 million long-haul trucks. There are 36 million vans doing the sort of last mile into cities. How likely is it that autonomous vehicle technology can firstly assist truck drivers? Again, truck drivers, difficult to find. Average age is late 50s. Young people don't want to be truck drivers, even though it's quite a well-paid job. How likely do you think we are to see autonomous vehicle technology assisting truck drivers and then replacing truck drivers?
Let's see, I'm not sure about the assistance per se. I mean, certainly you can provide the truck drivers the same type of solution, ADAS solution that we have, in order to reduce the rate of accidents, warnings, autonomous, AEB, so emergency braking, and the like. By the way, trucking is also pretty well fitted with this sort of solution, even though the fleet may be older, so there's a generational issue. But certainly there are safety benefit we can bring to the trucking space. In terms of replacing, it's a different thing. certainly I can see probably more application in long distance trucking than I do for short distance or in interurban or peri-urban applications. Again, long distance hub to hub applications where you have a steady speed, no bikers, pedestrians, no and divided highway, so a division between divider between the two distances. So that just like we see in the US, we will see very soon in the US, and we've seen already in China. I can see similar applications also taking place in Europe with very long distance, and that would improve also the lives of the drivers. We can then start to drive around their cities and be home every night rather than driving long distance across Europe. And also bringing also faster deliveries, because we can operate then 20 hours a day versus the limit that the drivers can operate. So this is also probably impacted by regulations. Again, Europe tends to be more careful, and I respect that. At the same time, that should be should see applications of deployment. But again, more likely long distance than inner city.
Okay, and what we saw initially when autonomous vehicle technology started was that the OEMs were very keen to lead in that space, but it was so expensive. They're now pulled back and they're looking more at partnerships. So we've seen a partnership between Waymo and Toyota with Maven. We've seen a partnership with WeRide from China and Renault in France to do a shuttle in Spain. Do you see that the autonomous vehicle companies will start partnering with big players that have established footprints, have dealerships? You've got VW Moya going it on their own, and now you've got Renault going with WeRide with a competing product and service. How do you see this collaboration, and how do you see it with the political tensions, understanding that autonomous vehicles have cameras and data, and do you think that European companies will partner a lot with Chinese companies because their technology is so much better than the European technology? Do you think that will be a problem, or do you think that will be the future?
Let me take a little step back and then look at overall transformation of partnerships across the industry, because there has been a series of announcements in the past few weeks between the tech companies, the companies that develop the AD tech per se, ride-hailing platform companies, OEMs. Between the three stakeholder groups, we've seen a series of announcements in the past weeks, especially weeks, but more broadly months. And among them, I would say and this stems probably in the fact that there's been increasing amount of rides, and especially pretty visibly as well with Waymo in the US, less visible in China, but nevertheless deployment. And we've seen, for instance, Uber waking up. For those who don't remember, Uber back in 2016 starting ATG. It's a technology group that was developing autonomous driving technology, and then they sold that in 2020 to Aurora. So they had it for 4 years. Uber's competitor in the US, Lyft, also had the same initiative, started in 2017, sold it to Toyota in 2021. And so when they came out of the space because it was too costly, they didn't see, I guess, the light of day at the end of the tunnel. And nevertheless, both Uber and Tesla and Lyft, and especially Uber, has jumped back in the space with partnering with the latest one I saw just today with Pony AI. Previously was WeRide, with Waymo in the past. So Waymo and Uber have exclusive partnership to deploy Waymo's technology and vehicles in Austin and Atlanta. This partnership with Toyota that you just referred to, Ross, encompassing pairing of technology, but also the development of personal autonomous vehicle, potentially. There's partnership with Momenta, a Chinese AD tech company. This name, and the list is long, and it's with mobility as well, and that's with Lyft. So there are a number of partnerships. We've seen also on the OEM side, besides Toyota and Uber, we've seen Renault and WeRide. This is not new because Renault Nissan, the alliance, invested in WeRide a few years back. So the partnership that we saw at Roland Garros last summer, but also more recently in Madrid. This is a continuation of that, and we'll see more. I'm aware of other partnerships yet to be announced between a major OEM and a major ride-hailing player I can't talk about, but this is there will be more announcements because again the industry is the deployment is really picking up, and it still has a lot of movements both on the riding platform side because they don't want to miss out, they don't want to lose market share to those players, but also on the part of OEMs that see a way to sell their vehicles, but also a way to at a later stage to sell this, autonomous personal vehicles or personal autonomous vehicles. And here, as far as Europe is concerned, it's no different. It will take more time because of regulations, but we'll see eventually the deployment of those application partnerships. Certainly, some cases they are for Europe. Again, we're right. Renault. In the case of, I think, due to some other partnership that I mentioned, are for Europe. I forgot which ones.
And who will ultimately be the winner of the autonomous vehicle technology? You've got three big players. You've got the platform providers, Uber and Lyft. You've got the OEMs, VW, Renault, as you just mentioned. And then you've got the software companies, Waymo, Wave, Imagery, ADAS Tech, and the list goes on. There are lots. Who ultimately will win? Will this make cars more desirable, and car ownership will become, much more desirable and be a premium? People will pay for this technology in their Mercedes or BMW, or will it radically reduce car ownership and push people into Ubers, which now has a much lower operating cost because they got rid of the driver, as what Chalice referred to, the dude sitting behind the wheel, I think, many years ago? Or is it going to be a great new business for Google to replace, maybe ad revenue that goes down with AI?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are different ways to look at that. At this point, the industry is pretty concentrated with a few players, and those that operate robotaxis. I'm thinking about Zoox, which is yet to start operations in the US. They've been saying for a few months now, for safety reasons, that it's been delayed for safety reasons, that it will be launching in Las Vegas and San Francisco. That should happen again. Would probably happen this year. I'm talking about them because they are doing the vehicle, the AD stack, and the riding platform. So they're doing the whole thing. Waymo has been doing the AD tech and the riding platform, not the vehicle. Same thing for Baidu, in China, for Pony AI, for Rayride, AD tech, the AD tech and the platform. Now we've seen with Waymo a disbanding of that, or destacking, if you will, of that approach with partnership with Uber, which may be a way to test the water and to assess the system. The other players have, for the most part, been selling the tech. We talk about Momenta, Wave, ADAS Tech, and others are doing only the AD Tech, partnering on one side with the OEM to install their hardware on them, and the vehicles to be obviously properly modified with redundancy and everything to be fit for purpose. And the third player being the platform where shared mobility is taking place, whether it be for cargo or people. So between those players, I would say that look at it from different sides rather than who will win, who has most to win, to lose. The riding platform, certainly they don't play that game. They will lose out. In San Francisco, the statistics we see, the estimates we've seen is that 20% of the market for ride-hailing has been taken by Waymo in about a year. That's what Lyft was doing.
But that's quite incredible to think. I mean, 20% of the market in a year. Wow, that's moving fast.
With probably maybe, I don't know, in tune of 600 vehicles, so thereabout. And Waymo has had a month ago 1,200 vehicles across California. So probably 2/3 of that, half of that, well, half, 2/3, whatever. So in that ballpark, say 600, maybe 600-800 vehicles in San Francisco. So 20% of that. So obviously there's big risk for riding platforms. OEMs also are at risk because if this, when this thing's really gains speed, builds speed, they may be positioned as a provider of commodity. So, and obviously commodity is not good position to be on because you lose all price power. So they also want to be partnered, like Toyota is doing with Uber, with Waymo, sorry. Just like Zeekr and previously and Hyundai are doing. So they want to be part of that game. And if you look back, 3-5 years ago, even less so 2 years ago, OEMs, some of the OEMs already wanted to be play a key role. There was the case of GM with Cruise. GM was a major stakeholder in Cruise, very key partner, very close, working together. I mean, basically, Cruise was developing technology for GM in close partnership together and under the control of GM. And together developed a vehicle, and we're doing the whole thing like Zoox is looking at doing, and because GM didn't want to lose out on that, didn't want to become a customer seller of commoditized vehicles. So there's a lot to lose for riding platforms for OEMs. The AD tech probably have a high hand in this because they have the tech that the others need. It's about how they would play their hand, remain consolidated, or just become a tech provider, like it is happening in the trucking industry.
Okay, and we've got another few minutes, so let's sort of move to a new application. I just read recently that the Piech family, the Porsche VW family, have invested in defense startups, and obviously autonomous vehicles have a massive application in defense technology. At our summit in London, we have a partnership with the UK Ministry of Defence, who have a division looking at new technology, and they've allocated a budget of 2.7 billion a year to invest in new technology, obviously drones and autonomous vehicles. Could this be a big new application, understanding how effective drones have been used in the war with Russia and Ukraine, understanding that there's now 800 billion funds allocated for Europe. Europe wants to build its own defense industry. Could we see a whole autonomous vehicle defense industry growing and mainly coming out of Europe now that Europe is behind but trying to catch up in military? Is this possibly a very big opportunity for entrepreneurs in the autonomous vehicle space?
Yeah, so the answer, the simple answer is yes. Certainly the application is by and large applicable to off-highway as it's already been deployed in mining, in agriculture, in construction, and certainly going to military is no different from a deployment standpoint, from a use case standpoint. Obviously, there's safety issues. There's reliability is to be higher and everything. So, but at the same time, there is definitely an appetite. I suspect there will be an appetite for the technology more so now, given the geopolitics taking place and the budget increase that you just referred to. There's been already some applications in the US. Some of the players have partnered with military for military applications. Several of the smaller players have done that because, I guess, as a way to gain financing. Because the good thing with military budget is that they pay up front, whereas in robotaxi or trucking, you need to invest, and then you hope that you will generate revenue to pay yourself back. In the case of military applications, I understand that you get money up front, and this is what's been the case in the US. And it certainly has been used to finance some of these businesses. Nevertheless, looking at it more positively, yes, the growth in the increase in the European military budget is certainly an opportunity for tech companies to jump on and provide technology, obviously, and I will say that for proper use of technology and not to make war, not to just as a defense matter, not as a way to attack other people, just to.
Yeah, sure. One of the applications that the UK Ministry of Defence is looking for is for disaster relief. With floods and earthquakes, how can you use autonomous vehicle technology there to rescue people? Okay.
Yeah, it's been used. It's also used for fire, for fire, fire not prevention, but development. Obviously, launching, sending a vehicle to in the forest rather than sending people and put them at risk. But there are other applications like that. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, that's our 30 minutes. Marc, anything else from your side? Any other comments or thoughts?
Well, no, I'm quite positive about the industry. You know, it's really bouncing back. We've seen also last few months a lot of investment going in. To tune, I think, 6 billion. I mean, some big tickets like Wave 1 billion and Waymo 5 billion, and we'll see probably an increased appetite for the technology. Hopefully, Europe will catch up very soon because I'm convinced that these are solutions that bring increase safety and also bring benefit to the users. So look forward to seeing where we go, but certainly hoping for Europe to pick up the ball and get started.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of appetite now coming from the buyer side in Europe. Like I said, public transport authorities, public transport operators, airports, ports, military, and now logistics. So even if Europe doesn't develop its own solutions, it will be buying solutions from America and China. Yeah, that there's no doubt. Okay,
hopefully we'll have homegrown solutions.
that is clearly the hope, but yeah, that we hope. Okay, thank you so much for those that listened, and thank you very much, Marc Amblard, for working on the third edition of the AV ecosystem map.
It was the third, yes.
Third edition,
and the fourth one later this year, right?
Okay, super, and thank you, Lisa Bailey, for putting it together from Autonomy.
Yes.
And
thanks,
hope to see
Lisa. And
hope to see you in London at the AV Summit. Okay, thanks so much.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.